Welcome, everyone, to this Tuesday morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, session on Inuit focused legal services and the future of Indigenous justice, brought to you by the Law Society of Nunavut. I'm glad we've got a great turnout for this presentation, and it looks like we've got some folks that I haven't met before, so I'm happy to have all of you in the room. My name is Victoria Perry. I am a mostly a criminal defense lawyer, but do some other areas of law, specifically wills and estates and police misconduct. And my practice is predominantly in Nunavut. Here in the room with me, I have our two amazing panelists. Firstly, Mandy Samartok. Mandy brings extensive experience working at the intersection of Indigenous justice, policy, governance, and implementation, and who will be speaking today to how the Indigenous justice strategy intersects with and sometimes falls short of Inuit specific justice needs. She's also the president of Tungasugit Inuit in Winnipeg. Natasha Ellis is counsel at Trippier Law and is one of the key contributors and researchers behind the Northern Lights and Southern Justice report. And that report is available on the Law Foundation of Nunavut website. Natasha did a lot of research into service providers and justice partners and helped to develop the report. And so she's bringing in some great insight into the findings and recommendations of that report. Just before we get too deep into the colonial tunnel that we're about to take you down in this presentation, I'd like to really ground us in a traditional frame of mind in Inuit law. And so I'd like to turn it over to Mandy, who's going to share a story from Pita Ilnik.
Ublakut, everybody. My name is Mandy Samoktok, and I guess Natasha has introduced me, but I've been practicing law for almost 18 years, mostly in Nunavut, and in many different forms. But the last number of years, I have been working with the federal government on the Indigenous justice strategy. And while I was just getting myself grounded also, I reached out to Peter and asked him if Inuit had a traditional legal system where people were punished for bad things. In about October 2024, because that's something that I had been wondering in my head for a number of years. Since I was a defense lawyer for the first little bit of my practice up in Nunavut, and had seen a lot of things happen in my mind and in my head, and I'm going to read word on word what he said. And his answer was, yes, we had justice for Inuit who continually were bad to the other Inuit who continually behaved badly. I'm going to write a little story I think you'll find interesting. He said, this is the story I often told when I'm teaching about Inuit unwritten customary laws. When there was someone who was continually doing wrong for others at an outpost camp or a mini village, elders decided that this man should be sent out away from the village so that he learns about the land and can survive on the land. The elders decided that a man would bring him out on the land, far away from the village. When he brings him out, he would teach him how to survive on the land. He provided him with all the hunting tools, snow knife, harpoon, dogs, all the things he needed to survive with on the land, but he taught him how to use all the things he needed to survive, and he provided them. He taught him how to build an igloo as well. Every so often, when time passes, he was told by the elders to go and see him and how he was doing. Each time he sees him, he made improvements, and he would tell the man how that he was recognizing his mistakes, and he would start talking about improving himself, that he would do better as a member of the family and as a village. The man would return home with the news about the man's improvements, and the elders would think, and they were happy to hear the good news. Finally, when the days became longer and the man was asked to go back and see the troublemaker, wow, he thought, when he went back to see him, the man had improved quite a lot. He had healthy dogs, he had lots of food and caribou skins and seal skins. He had learned a lot from being out on the land alone. He also made snow knives and ulus and other things that he needed to survive with. The man, the teacher, returned to his village and reported all this. The elders thought, wow, he is ready to go back and live with the community or the village and their members. They asked the man to go back and get him. The man went back. The troublemaker was happy to hear the good news. They both went back to the village, and the Inuit at the village were happy to have the man back to his family and other members of his village. He gave the caribou and seal skins to the community. He gave the snow knives he made to the men and the ulus he made to the women. The man had made so many improvements to his life. The community accepted him. The troublemaker is no longer a troublemaker, and he continued to be a good, productive member of his fellow Inuit. Peter told me that story because he was trying to let me understand that traditionally we lived in a society where we didn't really think of punishment. We were in a place where we needed to become one and whole, and where we were trying to be happy, I guess, not happy, but together. And um, and that yes, we had a traditional legal system, I guess you could say, but it wasn't what we had. And I guess it's something that he knew the work that I was going to be making, but he also wanted me to understand that the work that I was going into was was something that and the work that I've been doing was something that could be much different for Inuit. He also gave me an analogy that he wanted me to learn from, and really I didn't really understand it until the work, because I've been working with with Inuit partners on the Indigenous justice strategy. And he said, Mandy, I think you'll understand this eventually. And I eventually did. And he said, here's an analogy that he would give to inmates when he was working on corrections. He says, when I was working with Inuit as an elder for corrections, I used to use this analogy. They thought it was something really good to learn about, and it's something that corrections has modernized by having for Inuit men and others. It seemed to have worked. To this day, sometimes I still get a call from people who used to be incarcerated, and some say they now have a family, a kid, and working at the co-op or local companies. This makes me happy to report. One of the men who learned a lot from this story I often told. He says, when I was a young boy, we would travel by dog team, and the days had become very long at that time. My father would stop at a high hill, looked out at the distance, and said, Ungahit Tagaluk, very far to that destination. That would depress me. His next line was, Kima Nik Nami, Tikitu Maha Galuk. It's not running away from us. It will eventually be reached. He said, I used to tell inmates you will go home again someday. Then they will go to a halfway house. One day an inmate got to Iqaluit and called me and said, Your father was a wise man. I'm now at a halfway house in Iqaluit. I'm close to going home. He said, My destination is getting nearer. And I kind of didn't take that into my head because I thought, oh, he's talking to inmates. But then I thought, wait, he's also telling me that he took that to heart from his dad. And it's a lot of work that I'm doing with this Indigenous justice strategy. And we're really not where we are yet. Um, and it does look very far away, but we're going to get there someday. And that's what we're working towards. Um, so I think uh, I have, you know, we're still trying to work with Inuit and all that stuff. And it's really great that I've got Pita that I do rely on when I do need him. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Mandy. It's really great to have that set out at the beginning before we get into uh, some of the more colonial structures that we are navigating in today's world. So, moving on, I would like to set out the purpose and structure of this session. It is intentionally conversational, so please feel free to raise your virtual hand and we will call on you and invite you to turn on your camera and join the conversation with us. So Natasha is going to begin by walking us through the Northern Lights Southern Justice Report, what is set out there, what the report found, and why those findings matter. And then we're going to come back to Mandy to hear about how those findings connect to the Indigenous justice strategy, including whether there is alignment and where Inuit specific approaches are still required. I'm then going to moderate a discussion between the two of them and invite you all more strongly to join the conversation at that time. However, if you want to jump in at any time, please do feel free. The goal of this presentation is to offer both a policy level lens as well as practical takeaways for all of you in the room, as well as our policymakers and service providers working with Inuit community or the justice system generally. So just before I turn it over to Natasha, I want to briefly ground us in why Inuit-focused services require distinct attention. Nunavut's justice system operates within a vast geography and small, widely dispersed communities. There's a heavy reliance on circuit courts, and there's a high turnover among legal professionals and systems that were largely designed outside of Inuit worldviews and governance structures without a lot of consultation. While Inuit make up the majority of Nunavut's population, the justice system remains structurally Southern in language, process, leadership, and assumptions about how justice should function. This session is not about incremental fixes. It's about reimagining legal service delivery in a way that is Inuit led, Inuit governed, and Inuit responsive. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Natasha to walk us through Northern Light Southern Justice.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm really pleased and really feel honored to be able to speak with you today about the Northern Lights Southern Justice Charting a Course for Inuit Focused Legal Services report. During my articling year, I had the opportunity to support this work by conducting a needs assessment for Inuit legal services in Manitoba. I also got to attend the legal summit that was held at the University of Manitoba, which brought together Inuit elders, community and service providers, and institutional leaders. So my role in this, I began looking for basic information, starting with population data on Inuit in Manitoba. Easy enough, I thought. Statistics Canada had the census data, 730. Okay, so that's an increase from the 610 of the previous census. But then I realized the data being collected and or reported on Inuit in Manitoba was not only rare, but it was inaccurate. And this also meant that many of the issues that were faced by Inuit visiting or living in Manitoba were ignored within the legal system. According to health researchers, the estimated population of Inuit residing in Manitoba is closer to 1,500, two-thirds of that in Winnipeg. And there are more than 15,000 medical visits to Manitoba from the Kavalik region of Nunavut. And these medical visits would range in length from a few days to extending over several months or years. So a lot more than 630. I was unable to find information on the number of Inuit who travel to Manitoba for other purposes, education, training, work, what have you. So I looked at the justice and legal service providers in Manitoba specifically, started with Indigenous court worker program. As many of you will know, court workers are a valuable resource for people who are in conflict with the law, assisting individuals explaining what's happening, providing referrals, and assisting with communication. And at the time, there were no Inuit court workers in Manitoba. In terms of the Indigenous justice programs, there were no Inuit-specific Indigenous justice programs or services. Then I looked at Legal Aid Manitoba. There was no reported data, especially not any disaggregated data. So, nothing really to report on there. And then Manitoba Justice, the courts division, they don't collect Inuit-specific data. So again, no information about the number of Inuit people who are engaging with the courts in Manitoba. And aside from a few reported decisions, there really was very little information. Then I looked at community legal service providers, including CLEA, a Community Legal Education Association, and the Legal Help Center, both in Winnipeg and both doing great work. But these organizations did not collect or report on this type of demographic information either. At the time, there were no Inuit-specific letter report writing services in Manitoba either. So basically, at that time, there were no Inuit-specific legal services in Manitoba. But there did appear to be a need for it. So we heard from the two community organizations working to support Inuit in Manitoba. And Nikki with Tungasugi had a clear message. Then she said that there is a huge need for Inuit legal services. And then I looked into the health and social science research, and they said there was a need. Dr. Wayne Clark is a subject matter expert on Inuit health and social issues in Canada, and he's authored many expert reports and papers. And they have, among other things, described barriers to health, education, social inclusion, economic and other well-being issues faced by the Inuit, including those living in southern Canada. And he's also commented a lot on the lack of data generally, and also the lack of disaggregated data specific to Inuit. So the impacts on involvement with the criminal justice system sort of were the most obvious, but the lack of access to Inuit-focused legal services also impacts in family law and child protection and civil and administrative law. Some of the statistics from the health research talk about in Manitoba specifically that 12.6% of Inuit who are in Manitoba had been charged but not necessarily convicted of a crime, and that 6.5% of Inuit here had also been the victim of a crime, and that because of the context of rapid social, cultural, and economic change, which can be magnified by the social exclusion and a disadvantage in southern regions of Canada, that there's also higher rates of mental health problems than in the general population. There's also really high rates of involvement with child and family services with children in Manitoba. So there's lots of involvement, just not a lot of data. Then we heard from lawyers practicing in Nunavut who said there was a need for Inuit specific services. So the feedback from the survey, and some of you who are watching probably participated in the survey as well. So a lot of issues surrounding cross-jurisdictional problems through child and family services with navigating transfer of files and between agencies and courts in different jurisdictions, issues with legal aid and trying to access from one jurisdiction but needing service in another and not understanding the system, issues with court appearances, where they're wanting to resolve a matter, but they're no longer in that jurisdiction. And then a lot of issues related to traveling with issues that arise and that maybe they'll traveling for medical or another purpose and get charges, and then they're faced with a decision to either stay in that jurisdiction to attend court as they're instructed to do so, and miss the returning flight back home, or they end up with nowhere to go, or they return home and then don't attend court. So as you can imagine, there was lots of examples from the community, and some of the specific takeaways from the criminal justice perspective in the system was that this escalation of minor charges, going from somebody could have a very minor charge that because they're not in their jurisdiction or they're not able to attend to dealing with these matters, that it turns into like repeated arrests without a resolution, and it just something small just turns into a major barrier, and that can follow them, and potentially bail conditions or release conditions can follow them for years. Another big issue had to do with show cause hearings and bail challenges. And because you need someone in both jurisdictions, or there could be issues with technology or unreliable connections, that there's just further added challenges. And, it's difficult to deal with them. They don't have somebody on the ground that could help resolve these issues. Another one was understanding legal conditions. So adhering to conditions that have been imposed is crucial, and if there isn't understanding and there's issues with, is this realistic to impose this on someone who doesn't have anywhere else to stay, or maybe a language barrier, there just wasn't the support there. Consistency of legal representation of, if something happened in Winnipeg or in Manitoba or in another southern hub that they just didn't have anybody, and none of it may not have been able to assist them, and likewise. And then issues to do with the transfer of jail sentences. Again, a lot of these issues that were raised were things that the legal service providers were aware of, people experiencing them were aware of, but the system wasn't recognizing. There wasn't a lot of, there was nothing being done about it because it wasn't being reported and nobody knew about it. So in summary, as we went through all of this, we recognized that there was just a simple scarcity of data on Inuit accessing legal resources or their involvement with the justice system in Manitoba. Most of our data came from health researchers, and that the available data typically aggregated as Aboriginal or Indigenous and not Inuit. And what was also really clear from the research and the feedback from the community is that the need for these services would not have been recognized or addressed without direct advocacy and listening to the community input and receiving community support and moving forward. So if you haven't read the report yet, as Victoria mentioned, it is on the Law Society of Nunavut website, and there is a lot more information in there about some specific stories of individuals, as well as experiences of specific issues, and also recommendations for moving forward. So thank you, and I'll pass it back over to Victoria.
Thanks, Natasha. I appreciate that reflection on the cross-jurisdictional legal issues that community and community serving organizations had explored, and then were the subject of that report. It really, to me, makes clear that Inuit-focused justice requires both structural change, and political will to actually make this stuff happen. Um, okay, so taking a step back from this community focused perspective and hearing from the other side, the government, Mandy, I would like to turn it over to you to situate these findings within the broader Indigenous justice strategy, which, of course, is a national framework, which you have been working on. I'm going to share the PowerPoint and pass it over to you, Mandy.
Okay. Now this is just a very our very high level overview of the Indigenous justice strategy and the Inuit uh, priorities chapter that I can share right now. I apologize if anybody was hoping for anything more. But anyways, the Indigenous justice strategy originated from a Minister of Justice's mandate letter in January 2021. And its goal was to develop, in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous partners and provinces and territories, a strategy to address systemic discrimination and the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the justice system. And this issue is a priority, is a priority for the government, because the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the justice system has been growing for decades, despite efforts to address the problem. Currently, Indigenous people account for approximately 5% of the Canadian population, and as of back in 2022 and 2023, Indigenous men and women comprise over 33% of the federally incarcerated population. And as of 2022 and 2023, nearly 50% of federally incarcerated women are Indigenous. And of course, as known, the case is more so in Nunavut. And Indigenous people are young and one of the fastest growing demographics in the country. It can therefore be expected that overrepresentation's trend will continue to grow unless meaningful and concerted action is taken. And this is particularly for nonviolent or administrative matters, and interrupts the well-being, safety, and stability of people, families, and communities. Incarceration is an expensive and ineffective approach for addressing the social factors that contribute to criminalization, and the economic costs of this problem are significant and compound over time. The factors that influence overrepresentation are complex. Justice system changes are needed, but changes to social systems are equally important. Are you having trouble, Victoria?
There we go.
Okay.
Is
We
this
can
the
go to
three
the
you
next
want or
screen.
the next one? Next one?
Next one. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm waiting for your instruction to flip.
Okay. Yeah. You can flip. In Are we in the next one? Sorry, I'm having trouble viewing. Maybe. Are we on the next one anyways? On developing the strategy?
Okay, we're here. We're on developing the strategy.
Okay. In developing the strategy, the work needed to be done in close partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis representative organizations and communities. Pre-engagement was done with national Inuit Indigenous organizations and other key partners during the summer and fall of 2021. And this created relationship building and scoping with key partners. And then during the spring of 2022 and December of 2023, we did Indigenous-led engagement. And we did this by engaging with 38 Indigenous communities and organizations from across the country who led their own engagements on what an IJS should entail. We did this by making call outs to through certain to the public and ask them to provide their to provide us with their ideas. And then during the fall of 2022 and December 2023, we had Justice Canada-led engagement. The Justice-led engagements were implemented to ensure there was space for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and communities that did not receive funding under the call for proposals to participate in the IJS conversations. These sessions also provided a mechanism for involving provincial, territorial, and federal government partners and practitioners in the conversations with Indigenous groups. This included virtual and in-person sessions in all regions of the country. We also had a focused stream of engagements at 11 federal correctional institutions and 3 community-run Section 81 healing lodges across Canada. Online engagement opportunities for the public, and over 1,400 people participated in these conversations. Between December 2023 and May 2024, we reported the development based on the reports from the 38 funded organizations and the ideas generated through the Justice Canada-led engagements. Justice Canada released an IJS key elements consultation draft in June of 2024. And then between June 2024 and December 2024, we did co-development consultations and validation, and the key elements consultation draft formed the foundation for final process of co-development with modern treaty and self-governing nations and national Indigenous organizations. This phase also included consultation with key partners like provinces and territories, and online validation with the public. You can move on to the next one. The final co-developed IJS was officially released on March 10, 2025. The IJS included 26 co-developed priority actions that can be grouped into 7 themes: collaborative, relationship, and accountability, long-term and predictable funding, justice and wellness, policing, corrections, revitalization and enforcement, and legislation. In addition, all priority actions in the IJS are to be advanced in a distinctions-based, strength-based, trauma-informed, culturally safe and appropriate, holistic, intersectorial way. Priority actions are also to be advanced in a manner that supports the self-determination of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Distinctions-based chapters set out priorities for action from First Nations, Inuit, and Métis co-development partners. The IJS including its priority actions and distinctions-based chapters are considered interconnected. Now I'll move on to speak about the Inuit priorities chapter, if you could move on. The Inuit priorities chapter has 7 priorities, and it sets out action from co-development with Inuit. And it has the priorities go like this. Infrastructure, which outlines the infrastructure priorities in Inuit Nunangut related to justice. Infrastructure is critical to the safety of communities, improving access to housing, shelters, and transitional housing, as well as community recreational spaces, is important for reducing interactions with the justice system, preventing crime, and supporting rehabilitation of offenders. In addition, well-resourced Inuit justice centers will help improve access to justice for Inuit. Supporting Inuit community wellness. This section highlights prevention and wraparound supports to help prevent crime and support community wellness. Prevention supports outlined in this section. Sorry. This prevention supports outlined in this reflects the holistic nature of crime prevention and identifies solutions for improving Inuit health and well-being. Improving access to justice. This section focuses on interventions and actions to address systemic barriers for Inuit within the Canadian justice system. Actions seek to improve access to the Canadian justice system, including by creating supports for those requiring access navigating it. Policing. This section outlines actions related to ensuring policing services are culturally relevant and responsive to Inuit community needs. In Nunavut, Nunatsiavut, and Inuvialuit, policing services are delivered by the RCMP. In Nunavik, the Nunavik Police Services delivers policing to the region. Corrections. This section includes actions related to the corrections services system with a focus on culturally specific supports for rehabilitation and healing of incarcerated Inuit and reintegration supports that focus on reducing recidivism and preventing re-victimization. Inuit-led justice interventions. This section seeks to support Inuit-led interventions in the justice system, including work on revitalization of Inuit legal and justice concepts, Inuit diversion and restorative justice programming, and on-the-land programming. Supporting Inuit self-determination and jurisdiction. This section addresses Inuit self-determination and the recognition of jurisdiction over administration of justice, the implementation of justice-related obligations under Inuit modern treaties, and the use of the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee to advance Inuit priorities in the Indigenous justice strategy. So currently, and we've decided that, or we currently moved on to a part where we're using the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee for partnership with the 4 Inuit land claim organizations, the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation, Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, Makivik Corporation, Nunatsiavut Government, as well. Pauktutit Inuit Women of Canada sit on there. And that's currently where we are. And that's what the IJS is, as I can share with you. Yeah, so that's it.
Thank you, Mandy. That was great. All right. Thank you very much for that. Mandy was concerned that she wouldn't be able to go too in depth, but I thought that was an in-depth review. And I now see Marie's comments in the chat. Thanks everyone for alerting me of the issue with the slides. Natasha, did you have any comments arising after hearing Mandy speak? Do you have any follow-up?
I think that Mandy talking about the uh, justice strategy. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to go on, and the fact that you're at the table and involved in that and part of leadership, I think, is so important. I think more generally back to the story that you shared with us that had come from PETA, that what really speaks to me was about, community knows what they need. And we really just need to listen and amplify those voices. So, I mean, that was my takeaway from it. I don't know that it's really a question, but I, I think it's a reminder for everybody, if you're doing this work and involved with it, to listen to community, because all of the answers and of what's required and what's needed and what's not needed can be found in community. So we just have to make sure that the community is listening and leading in all aspects of this.
Thanks, Natasha. All right, so I'd now like to invite any questions that anyone in the room might have. Please feel free to raise your virtual hand and ask your questions. I would prompt you to think about your own roles as lawyers, policymakers, or service providers, and what you, in your specific area of the law, are doing to support Inuit-focused justice, even if you're not in a role that is a direct server of the justice system in Nunavut. I would argue that most lawyers can have some role, even if it's not direct, in assisting to implement this Indigenous justice strategy. Mandy, I'd love to start it off with a question to you. So, as an Inuk woman working in Indigenous justice policy and reform, what does meaningful engagement from non-Inuit lawyers, policymakers, and institutions look like to you when it comes to Inuit-focused justice? Like, what helps and what gets in the way?
Hmm. Well, okay, I'm going to have to step into my Mandy Inuk boots now and not talk as a government lawyer, if everybody can understand that. Know that I'm just talking as Mandy and not a Government of Canada lawyer. People just need to understand more, I guess. Know a lot of times. Well, first of all, okay, I'll introduce people to my great grandparents behind me. That's Victor and Leonie Samertok. And they go everywhere with me, to meetings, to negotiations, to stuff like this. And they ground a lot of things. People kind of sit there and be like, because they were at, my grandpa was one of the first uh, forcibly colonized, or, you know, men into Chesterfield Inlet. He was taken from his igloo and put into a house. And I don't think people really understand that just 3 generations ago, Inuit were colonized, and that there are probably a number of us Inuit lawyers here who still have parents or grandparents that have that connection, that close connection. And a lot of non-Inuit lawyers don't realize that it's that close still. So I bring my great-grandparents and I tell my stories about them to every meeting. And because because I work a lot on reconciliation, and it really helps people to sit back and be quiet. So if people could just understand that this isn't as far away as everybody thinks it is, and to know that those smiling faces behind me did live a different life. I know that my amok there on her deathbed, and because she asked me to stand beside her, but also when I was growing up, because I grew up between Winnipeg and between Chester. Every time she saw me, she would always tell me, Ingutak, I need to tell you this, and you need to remember this and tell this to everybody that you know. Inuit, we need to make sure that our lives are ones that get together and we're happy and we love each other no matter what. We need to know that we have to get along with everybody and do everything so that we're okay. Yeah, we might not like it, but that's what they do. And we love each other as Inuit, and we need to be happy and okay. I know that my great grandparents there were in Chesterfield Inlet when the residential school started there. And I know that a lot of the elders that I go to, like Peter, Youngnuk, still tell stories when they see that picture. They say, when I was brought to Chester, they became my grandparents. And I went to them when I needed stuff because they showed me their love. So that's what needs to be understood, that just 3 generations ago, even me, I had that connection. It's not something that we can, do this to. And that, yeah, we've got IQ, and it's more of an inherent thing that's there. It's more of a thing that's part of us. It's not just 8 words that you have to sit there and be like, what does that mean actually? No. It's something that is part of us, and it's something that we have to find a love for and find a way of being a part of. Nunavut's actually doing pretty good with it. And I think other Inuit and Inuit Nunangut are doing good with it too. We just need to also understand that we need to become. I know that one of the things that I'm finally understanding from my amok is that we need to become more accepting and happy and understanding and finding love where we are. That's something also that um, working in this with this IJS, I'm trying to work with also. Um, if that makes any sense. So
It definitely does. Thank you so much, Mandy. Natasha, hearing that really specific and grounded experience from Mandy, I'm wondering um, your thoughts as someone who's not Indigenous. So how did you, and do you, I guess, but did you approach your role in contributing to Northern Lights Southern Justice in a way that was accountable to Inuit communities? And what guidance would you offer other non-Indigenous lawyers who are working in similar spaces?
Uh, Hard to follow Mandy after after that really important and powerful sharing of her experience in Inuit culture and IQ. I think that I'm assuming that probably most people who are going to are watching or will watch this have who are not Indigenous have done some personal work on reflecting on 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 what it means to be involved with this. But if not, like um, when you're called to support this work or invited, step up. It's worth it personally and professionally. Um, but stepping up means listening first and listening always. Um, Lawyers, we like to talk a lot, but especially when doing this type of work and in the community is, you know, um, listening first and foremost, doing the work on yourself and doing the work to learn about as much as possible the community experience and sort of the issues. And then, community will always have the answers and will always know what needs to go on. So, you know, whatever you can do to offer your skills or resources or your knowledge about how the colonial systems operate or your time, your money, your connection or amplifying voices, can apply it to that. And then if you're gifted with knowledge from community or from Inuit, that to take it on and then bring it forward into other areas of work. In my other area, some personal advocacy in healthcare and just being mindful of that. And I mean, I don't know what else to say about that, but just be like, I think we all have the capacity to be mindful and to listen and everybody that I've worked with has been so generous with their time and knowledge sharing it. And it has been personally rewarding too. And um, it's, so I would encourage you to do it, answer the call and step up when given the opportunity.
Thank you for that. I have other questions I can ask. We've got time for about one more question. And so I would like to again invite anyone from the audience to feel free to turn on your camera or raise your virtual hand and ask that question. Otherwise, we can hear another question from me. I've got so many. Um, All right, not seeing anyone's hands raised, so I will ask that question. And I'll leave this up to Natasha or Mandy to answer, whoever kind of gets to it first. I'm curious, what role should Inuit governance play in oversight and accountability of justice programs?
I would love to say something, but truthfully, I don't think I can. So
Okay. That's fair. Natasha, do you have any thoughts? I know that you don't specifically work in justice, but within the work that you've done and the stories that you've heard, what do you think that role should be?
Um, I don't have the same constraints as Mandy, I guess, with employment. I think that from what I've heard and seen, uh, that if you want to do anything well, and if we want to have any sustainable or effective change, that the Inuit specific leadership, have to be at the table right away. It has to start that way, because otherwise, you don't know what direction you're headed, and not going to be reflective of what the community needs. So I don't know that there's a way to do this in a good way that doesn't start and end with Inuit governance and oversight of everything. So how that happens, I the only examples I really have of watching is having the wide invitation, and then just have a dedicated opportunity to um, to ask for Inuit leadership to infuse and sort of set the stage for all that work. So I don't know. They should be involved at right from the beginning.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank Natasha and Mandy for their insight and leadership. And thanks to all of you for coming to this session. It is means a lot to see so many of our territorial lawyers invested in these topics. So the future of Indigenous justice, particularly Inuit justice, does depend on these kinds of events, on listening carefully, supporting Inuit leadership, and being willing to change systems that were not really designed very well to serve Inuit community in the first place. So I hope today's discussion leaves you both with a deeper understanding and a clearer responsibility of some ways to move forward. And I'd like to invite you all to take action based on Mandy and Natasha's suggestions that they've provided here today. And I'd also like to invite you to check out the other awesome CLEs that the Law Society of Nunavut has upcoming, and those which have passed and are available on the Law Society of Nunavut's YouTube page. So, with that, I will say enjoy the rest of your days and goodbye.